Hey everyone, welcome back to the show. We're actually going to do something a little different today. We're going to do something called Did You Know? Because we have so much information, there's so much cool stuff out there that a lot of people don't know about, and we're going to put it into this segment. So we have our sip clips, we have like all these different things. This one is Did You Know? So without further ado, let me introduce my co-host, Foti Stamos. What's up, Foti?
Yasu Ari.
What's going on?
Excited for another clip here on our platform where we get to enjoy the time of discussing wine, introducing information, finding out fun facts, and get to drink at the same time.
So you keep telling me about this Did You Know? Because you have like all these like cool facts, whatever. What's today is gonna be? What are we launching with?
You know, what I find that's interesting is that there's so many grapes being cultivated around the world, like tens of thousands of grapes, right?
But I bet you there's, what do you mean tens of thousands of grapes? Like varieties?
Varieties, yes.
I thought you meant individual grapes. I was like, it's probably millions.
No, billions, quadrillions. And I bet you we've probably had about a million grapes ourselves.
Oh, easily. Easily. Last weekend, I had 1 million grapes.
Of course. But out of all those grapes, we're really only aware of maybe a dozen at most. But
yeah,
you know, though, that some of those grapes have either multiple names that they're being recognized with, or they're just two different names that they go by, depending where you are in the world.
Okay. So
the first grape we're going to talk about, did you know that one of the most famous popular white grape varieties, I think it's probably the second most consumed white grape, which is debatable. The first one is Chardonnay by far.
Mm-hmm.
Pinot Grigio.
Love it.
Also known, did you know, as Pinot Gris.
Now the difference in the Grigio and Gris is not a difference in the wine, but it's just a difference in where they named it?
Actually, that's a very good question. Same grape, it's the same grape, but depending on where it's grown, it changes its characteristics. So it's recognized as two different, it's recognized as the same grape with two different names. So in France, it's known as Pinot Gris, and it hails from the northern parts out in the Alsace area, right? And cooler climate, high elevation, so the wines tend to be a little more crisp, citrusy. And in Italy, it's known as Pinot Grigio. It's the Italian. So Pinot Gris basically is white grapes that have gray skins. That's where Grigio and Gris come into play. So
Gris is Italy, like gray.
Gray, correct. So depending where it grows in Italy, Italy being warmer climate, Pinot Grigio has a little more ripeness, a little more fruit, more concentrated flavor than Pinot Gris does in the northern parts of France. But it's the same grape.
Same grape, but tastes a little bit different from each other.
Correct. And in California, you get the grape identified either way. There are some producers in California that refer to it as Pinot Grigio, and there's other producers that refer to it as Pinot Gris.
Okay.
Why? That's up to them. And then when we move up north to the wonderful state of Oregon that makes amazing wine, it's referred to pretty much always as Pinot Gris and not Pinot Grigio. Okay. But it's the same grape. Did you know?
Did you know? I didn't know that, and thanks for enlightening me, because you know, obviously we could do many of these segments because I really don't know all that much, and probably a lot of people out there may know some stuff, may not know everything. So I think this is really interesting. So, but I don't think the difference between Pinot Gris and Pinot Grigio is what you set out to talk about today. I asked you a question, so we kind of got sidetracked, but what is it that you specifically were going to talk about today?
I was just going to identify grapes that have basically two names.
Okay.
They go by two names. So,
Okay, so we knocked the first one out, which is Gris and Grigio.
right. Now moving to another popular grape that most folks are going to relate to Australia. So there's Shiraz and Syrah.
Okay, this one's a good one because I've always thought they were two different things. Never understood why one is one and the other is the other, but go ahead.
So Shiraz, I don't know if my Australian accent is there, but Shiraz and Syrah are the same grape, but depending on where it's planted is the name they give it. So Shiraz has roots to ancient times in Persia, and it kind of made its way through Eastern Europe, the Middle East, Eastern Europe, all the way over to France. And when it got planted in France, it's known as Syrah. Same grape, just different profile depending where it comes from.
So was it named Syrah first, or was it named Shiraz first?
Shiraz.
Okay, so the French decided to change it.
Well, I think it's the French version of the word Shiraz.
Oh, okay, I see.
Right?
Okay.
So the funny thing is that depending again where you are in the world, outside of that area, in Australia and parts of South Africa, they refer to as Shiraz. But in California, in France, in other parts of Europe, they still refer to as Syrah.
Syrah. I kind of like Syrah better. I like saying it.
Well, that's your type. You like that soft, elegant roll off the tongue.
Syrah.
Right?
Shiraz is a little harsh for me.
That's like more like
Shiraz.
Right? But it's a fabulous grape. It does wonders in France. It grows, a lot of it grows in the Rhone Valley, and it's known for making blends in the Côte d'Rhône area. And it's responsible for a lot of wines that come out of the Châteauneuf-du-Pape, very reputable, high quality producing area in France, in the Rhone. And in California, a lot of producers, especially in the Mendocino area, Paso Robles area, they're growing a lot of Syrah, and it takes on this big, bold red wine with like some nice spice to it. But then when you go over to Australia, they're producing a lot of great Shiraz that is, robust, has lots of flavor, quite a bit of spice too in their wines. The famous iconic Australian winery Penfolds, they put out probably some of the most expensive Shiraz in the market. You don't really think of Shiraz as expensive when it comes from Australia, but they do make high quality Shiraz that are to die for. So there you go. Did you know that Syrah and Shiraz were the same grape?
I did not know that. I always thought it was something different, but I always also thought it was a little weird that they were so closely named. And I was like, why would they name this so close to the other one? So I was first aware of Syrah, so I just assumed Shiraz was like a ripoff of Syrah. my wine layperson definition of why they were so closely named.
You thought it was a marketing strategy.
Yeah, basically. I think everything's a marketing strategy.
Right. And
I think this segment right here is a marketing strategy, to be honest with you. What do you think?
I think you're trying to drive people to go to Santorini with the background. That's what I think.
That's a separate marketing strategy.
Right.
Two marketing strategies we're doing.
There you go.
All right. So is there anything else?
Yeah, there's plenty that we can keep going.
Let's do it.
I was gonna move on to now. Red Zinfandel, not to be confused with white Zinfandel, because white Zinfandel is not really a wine to me. It's just something that's made up, right?
Wow.
But red Zinfandel is an actual grape that has roots that stem from Italy. So the grape Primitivo and red Zinfandel are the same grape.
Red Primitivo and
No.
Zinfandel the same thing?
Red Zinfandel and Primitivo from Italy are the same grape.
Okay, I totally did not know that.
That's a curveball right there.
Well,
So,
why? Like, why would they take
so
the
what
same
happened,
thing and name it differently?
Ari, what happened is that, through like, over the years, over the centuries, all this trading that was happening and, explorers and merchants that were pretty much grabbing their local, whether it was local ingredients, spices, herbs, seeds, vines, they would transport those with them. And whenever they would land somewhere, they would actually, plant some of their local offerings. So these vines would get planted throughout the rest of the European countries, and then eventually they made their way to California or the U.S. And by the time they came to the U.S., it just kept getting altered and altered to create its own identity. But genetically, they're the same grape. It's just that over the years, they've grown in different parts of the world.
That's
But
interesting. That's very, very interesting. That's actually fascinating to me. How, like, over time,
there's a lot of
things
great history.
evolve, and even though they're the same thing, they evolve into two different entities.
Correct. And that's what the beauty of the fact that if you were to take a timeline and go through back into history, if you really like got into details with all these explorers, even famous explorers that are in the history books, they would actually travel with a good amount of their local offerings from their countries, and they would plant them as they would go, and just to see like how they would perform. And a lot of these vines would do pretty well. And that's why you see like the trade route with spices around the world, they started somewhere and it ended up there. So, it's fascinating how this crossover has happened and why certain cultures have certain things because of previous explorers bringing it to them, and then it just became part of their culture.
That's crazy. Wow. All right. What else? What else you got?
So, um, you know, there's a variety of other grapes that are out there that have multiple names. We just broke down Pinot Grigio and Pinot Gris. We broke down Syrah and Shiraz. We identified that
Primitivo and Zinfandel.
Primitivo and Red Zinfandel are the same grape, right?
So you have. Let me ask you this:
The
you
next
have
one,
to say red Zinfandel.
it has
You
to be.
can't just say Zinfandel.
Well, so today we're kind of adjusting to understand that the word Zinfandel on its own is identifying the red grape, even though there's still a percentage of our market that they still associate Zinfandel with white Zinfandel. So we're not there yet. We're getting better,
Okay.
right?
Gotcha.
So yeah, so we have that. But just be aware that whenever you're drinking red Zinfandel, you're drinking the roots of an Italian grape called Primitivo. And when you're having Primitivo, which there's a lot of it now in the market, it's the same grape as red Zinfandel. All right.
Interesting. Very interesting.
Moving from red Zinfandel and Primitivo, we have another grape called Grenache. Grenache is a grape that has roots that hails from France, but it's also been planted in Spain, which is known as Garnacha.
Wait. So I'm going to stop you here, and the reason is this doesn't seem like it's a different word. This doesn't seem like it's a different name. This just seems like there's a different pronunciation.
Yes, but I'll take it a little further because there's one more added element here.
Okay.
There's a fairly small island off the coast of Italy known as Sardinia, which happens to be a blue zone. And
Yes.
that grape got planted there.
A longevity zone. Let me correct you.
There you go, longevity zone. And in Sardinia, this grape is called Cananao. It's Grenache. It hails from France. It came down to Sardinia, and it's called Cananao. So Cananao is also Grenache. Same grape.
Okay. Now you're going to start confusing me. All right. So from France, came down to Sardinia, called Cananao.
Yes.
But it's actually Grenache.
And it's also planted in Spain, known as Garnacha.
Garnacha. But again, back to my previous point, isn't garnacha just garnache, but pronounced Spanish way?
Yes, but a lot of times it's labeled too as garnacha in other parts as well.
Interesting. Okay. Well, it's funny because I never really knew that there could be like one single grape variety that just evolved and morphed or traveled, and then naming conventions change. It's like, Champagne, for example, comes out of the Champagne region, and it's Champagne, and it can only be Champagne from the Champagne region, no matter where you do it. If you do it somewhere else, it's something else.
Correct.
But these grew elsewhere, and they kind of took it over wherever they were from. They took it to their own and renamed it, which is interesting.
Yeah, it's it's a lot of times a lot of these circumstances go unannounced for because we just don't know, and then we think that we're having different products or different productions, but it's actually coming from the same source, which is that
Crazy.
grape, right?
Yeah.
So there you have it. Did you know?
Did you know that all these different varieties, a lot of them are the same?
They
And
pretty much are. And I'll throw a couple of quick ones. There are like, so they're doing a lot of research and a lot of grapes are being studied. And they're finding that a lot of grapes have the same DNA genetically. They're just, whether they be clones or whether they're spun-offs of other varieties. But real quickly, Cabernet Franc is not Cabernet Sauvignon. It's its own grape. Some folks confuse Cabernet Franc as Cabernet Sauvignon. It's happened. I've seen it. But Cabernet Franc is its own grape. It's a spin-off. It was a hybrid. It was something that they experimented years ago where Cabernet Sauvignon, sorry, correction, Cabernet Franc, red grape, Sauvignon Blanc, white grape. They grafted the vines together and they came up with this clone called Cabernet Sauvignon.
So if you go back far enough, I mean, isn't there one universal grape?
I don't
Or do you
think
have to
so.
go back like millions of years?
Yeah, we got to go back to the caveman era.
It's like all humans are related if you go back far enough.
I think you're right. I think we're related.
I don't think so.
I think you're right. So, but yes, so it's fascinating that, there's so much information and we love bringing it to our segments. It's fun and it's interesting and it makes great conversation when you're at an event or when you're at a gathering.
That's a good point right there, because it absolutely makes for interesting conversation. I am learning, just like the audience, or let me, I won't say nobody knows this stuff, but let's just say there's a good chunk of our audience that probably didn't know this, I being one of them. And oh man, I can't wait till I have a conversation with somebody so I can bring this up, because I think it's like really cool. I think it's really, really fascinating. And if these are the types of things where, when you're like part of a seminar, you're doing like research or you're whatever, these are like kind of simple questions that a lot of people just don't bother asking, but a lot of people wonder. They're like, well, where did this come from and how did they name this? So it's very interesting, and a lot of people don't have access to that information. So we thank you, Foti.
My pleasure.
Who brings these awesome little trivia, and it's just really cool information. Did you know? I did not know, and I thank you for letting us all know.
My pleasure. And on to the until the next Did You Know segment. Cheers.
Yeah. So I can't wait for the next one. And I'm gonna give you a little bit of homework. I don't know if this is gonna ever become reality, but I was listening to a podcast about the plague in Europe in the Middle Ages, whatever it was, 1300s. Mm-hmm. And the plague traveled from trade. And then you were mentioning how they took seeds and vines and they grafted them here and they brought them there. Your homework is, did the plague, which wiped out a third of Europe, did that have a huge effect on the wine? And did it cause wine to change? Or did the future of wine have any effect because of the plague. I'd be very interested to know that.
I'm gonna-
Again, this is just off the top of my head, so
I'm
it's
gonna
not like.
report on that on our next segment.
All right.
Excellent.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Foti. Awesome information. Thank you, everybody out there, for listening, watching, and we will see you next time with Did You Know? And stay on the lookout for our sip clips, webinars, and all the other cool stuff that we do. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody.
Cheers.
Cheers.